wisdom,
prudentia,
justice,
justitia,
temperance,
temperantia,
courage.
fortitudo.
Applying ancient philosophy to modern life, this is the Sunday Stoic.
Hey everybody, this is Jayce. Steve was gracious enough to ask us to contribute our thoughts again as guest contributors to the Sunday Stoic. I had contributed a couple episodes, I think a couple of years ago, and when the time came around again to contribute something, a lot has happened. A lot's been going on in the world, and one of my best buds and I have been actually going through the text of the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, basically segment by segment, book by book. And what we'll do is we will take a passage, read it for a week, and then talk on Saturdays or Sundays. And it took a little bit of cajoling, and I had to call in the big guns. I had to leverage the influence of my buddy Aaron's wife to say, come on, man, just do it. So what follows here is a somewhat meandering, but I think really relevant discussion on what we've experienced. I also have another segment planned that will more or less put what we're discussing into practice. So hopefully you all don't mind this little departure from your friend and my, Steve's, regular contributions. I promise this will be brief and you won't be stuck with me too long. But yeah, here it goes. This is me and Aaron discussing the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, and the topic being how things are lost in translation and some of the things we've learned in trying to really interpret the Meditations. Oh, and also, I think Steve still has it, but there's a piano version of Steve's theme song, and that was actually done by Aaron. I gave him the task. I said, hey, play this song, but the way that Tom Waits would play it. And no more than a day and a half later, I had that in my inbox. So, Steve, if you're listening, which I know you are, if you still have that piano intro, feel free to cue it up at the end for this segment. Or if I have it, I'll do it. Anyway, here we go. All right.
Slap that slate.
3, 2, 1.
Oh, that was a great noise. I don't know what noise that is. Hold on. Yeah, there you are.
That was my clap.
That was a clap?
That was my clap, yeah.
I wish you could hear how it sounded on my side. It sounded like a snare drum from the 80s with one of those synthetic reverbs that end really abruptly but are really strong for like a split second.
It must be my room noise. Or maybe not. I don't know.
Whatever it is,
maybe it's
keep doing it.
Maybe it's the compression of the phone.
Yeah, it's probably that.
Yeah, because it's going from Bluetooth to phone to...
You and I have always liked iPhone compression.
Yeah.
Because it distorts really nicely.
Like I said, we're going to edit down a bunch, maybe except for that, because we'll just include all sorts of weird things in there.
My metronome is going.
Okay, so first and foremost, we are doing this because you and I have been working through the meditations of Marcus Aurelius, the Notes to Self of Marcus Aurelius.
Correct.
We started at book 2 just because...
just to skip the introductory.
Yeah.
Turduckins.
Yeah. Yeah. Just to skip the turducken, because we got to save room for stuffing.
Yep.
It was, and also mainly because there was, we're going passage by passage, and there was so much in there of, into Euripides the butcher for teaching me how to, properly use cable ties. We'll get back to that, and 9 years from now.
I feel like it'll make a lot more sense to do that last.
I think so. In good, in good storytelling in general, it's like usually the stories start from the middle of the action.
That's a good point.
Yeah, for us, I think that after having 8.5 years worth of marinating in Marcus's thoughts, I think you're right. I think we'll hear these points, and maybe everything else that'll make everything else make a lot more sense.
Well, I know for a fact he thanks his teachers, and we'll be able to read his thank yous to his teachers after we see what they taught him.
Right. Yes.
And then it'll be way more meaningful, and we'll be able to go, oh yeah, that guy had a lot of good stuff to say.
Yeah, and our guy Mark is really good about. He's a good teacher, and it's probably for himself in that he repeats things a lot. So I can't think of an example, but talking about
definitely themes, right? He'll say similar types of things over the course of many different passages.
Yeah, which you and I have discussed beforehand is. Probably his way that he's teaching himself. He'll remind himself. Something will happen during the day. He'll be in his court, and someone will insult him or give him a backhanded compliment. And every time he goes back and ruminates on it, he'll be like, "Oh yeah, these things are not things, and everyone's going to be dead soon." And none of this
yeah, he does say that a lot.
He does say that a lot. Yeah. It's and also, what was cool about how we started this was right at the beginning of the pandemic, and since Marcus was going through the Antonine Plague at the time, it felt really relevant.
Yeah. Oh, I also have something to say about the repetition part.
Yeah.
That this comes up a lot in older music, where you'll have, let's say, like a sonata or a symphony even, that you, the listener, might not really catch this because you're just listening to it. But definitely when you're looking at the sheet music, you go, okay, it goes, 64 bars, or it'll do a lot, like a big passage, and then it'll just repeat the whole thing, and you're just supposed to go back to the start and do it all over again, which nobody does that anymore. Almost nobody. It's very rare to see a piece of music now where they just say, okay, just repeat that whole thing, because these days they're going to want to change it up the second time around. They might rewrite a similar version of the first one, but it's going to have a lot of changes in it. I guess what I'm saying is there's something about the ancient world where they don't have, apart from writing, which even still wasn't as common or trustworthy, there's no other ways to record things. There's no visual recording for sure, other than like artwork. I guess what I mean is no video recording, and there's definitely no audio recording. So you don't have access to these repetition, like if I want to learn something, I could like watch a video, and if I didn't get it the first time, I just start it over. And if I didn't get it that time, I'll start it over. Oh, I wasn't paying attention that time. Start it over.
Sure.
So easy to do. Back then, both for music, which is how I kind of figured this out, and also for ideas, you know, a philosopher might benefit from repetition if he's working through a concept over the course of a long period of time. Because let's say you had something good last year and you forget it, or you wrote it down but you forgot where it was. You know, repetition is a huge benefit, which a author now, even a philosopher now, might not need to repeat anything ever.
Yeah,
because you can just search.
You had mentioned that too, I think, with what was like Beethoven or Mozart, where there would be more or less a lead that would come back towards the end as a bass, like a cello phrasing, right? Like it would come back in a different form. And you know, it's kind of like, it's like Chopin with the sort of explorations of, you know, what a scale can do, or what a you know, being in a certain key, you know, where you can really take the limits of it. And it's probably true too with thoughts and ideas, that if we're workshopping ideas, sometimes rephrasing it is maybe a better way to, I don't know, I guess help the absorption of it, the assimilation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So one thing that you and I have encountered over the past 2 years is, and also part of what I think I mentioned earlier, is that you and I have also we've been taking the translations of C.R. Haynes and George Long, but then also looking at the source material, the source text in ancient Greek. You and I have been finding instances where the word that makes the most sense to C.R. Haynes makes sense contextually, but may not have the same literal meaning, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, anybody that has taken like a high school language class of, let's say, something relevant to European languages like Spanish or something like that, French, you know, one of the first things you talk about is the cognates, right? The words that have like really similar sound or spelling and either mean the same thing or they could mean something totally different. And because there's Greek in a lot of English roots, you sometimes think you know what it's talking about and you really don't. So it's been like really fun and weird sometimes to just like open up that Greek and be like, what in the world is going on over here?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like, what was the word that we came across last? Like psyche.
Yeah.
But he's talking about, well,
in Greek, that's your soul.
Right.
Which I don't think in any English context it's your soul, right? It's always kind of a brain function, and we separate brain from heart from soul generally.
Yeah. And that would make a lot of sense that you have these people with a limited understanding of physiology. They know that they're thinking, but the mechanism behind it, I mean, I would be apt to say, yeah, there's a little ghost roaming around inside me talking. You know, it's like, what is that voice that you hear in your head? And that's it.
It's your psyche.
Which makes sense why then take a translator 100 years ago, which also I think C.R. Haynes did say in the preface to his interpretation, was he did his best to understand the meaning behind the words, but in times where he wasn't clear, he would just default to as faithfully representative of the of what the literal translation would be. I'm pretty sure I read that in the introduction.
Yeah, I bet the work of a translator is so hard, especially with I don't know if this is considered a dead language. I guess so, because nobody speaks it as their main functional language. But like with a dead language, like how are you really going to know what someone means? And then to throw into that mix, like there's problems with the physical text being unclear in parts.
Yeah, there's components that I think are missing, right? Like the page was cut off.
That's what I thought I read. Yeah, and so
I think it was in one of the footnotes.
That's tough, because you're relying on people who copied it down, but then you got to look into what they were copying from. And then translating from that's got to be tough because, if a language has a different sentence structure, there's a certain amount of understanding that someone can have about how a language functions. But then there's also going to be stuff that we just don't know. And so some of it really might be assumption. And
absolutely,
there's a chance that assumption could change the meaning of or the intention of the author.
Yeah.
That's
and there is. I think you're totally right. And of course, there are also liberties that were taken in terms of, you have this writer who doesn't exist anymore, and he exists in our thoughts, but he's gone. So, obviously we don't even have secondary or, third-hand sources that we can then go to and just ask the person, like, hey, what was this guy like? Well, what's the context of this? So there's a lot of, I think we discussed this too. There's liberties taken, like, for example, the scholarly way of adding words like the these and the thous that are included, maybe to make it sound a little fancier,
right?
Which also, as we were talking about beforehand, wasn't thee and thou originally an informal rather than a formal way of addressing someone?
Right. Yeah. It like almost corresponds similarly to Spanish, like tú, for you. Yeah. It even has a T at the beginning, thou, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Versus like usted. And I think you had mentioned, and correct me if I'm wrong about this, but wasn't the habit of doing that go back to Bible translations to make the reader's relationship with Jesus a informal one? Like, no, this isn't some emperor. This is a guy just like you that you can relate to. Is that right, or did I?
Well, I think it was a reaction to the Vatican's control over the text, and one of the things they did was they had it translated into Latin, and that became the official version of it. So when reformers started breaking off from the Catholic Church, they were like, we need to make this something that anybody can read.
Yeah.
So they chose a very common language version of it.
Similar to that, but not similar. It's sort of like how we were discussing the usage of how in the English version of, say, like the Bible, the word evil is used. But say, for example, in a version in Spanish, there's not a specific word for that evil. It's just mal, right? Like bad.
Right, yeah.
Which then makes a lot more sense when you think about the struggle between good and evil. It does, in a way, seem more logical to talk about the struggle between good and bad and not have some sort of, supernatural version of badness.
That's one of the fun things about looking into languages, is you realize each culture has a different way of expressing something similar. And, we read philosophers most of the time in our own languages, so we just assume they're like us, but they're really not. Like, think about all the times he's like very genuinely, or at least it seems that way, ostensibly, that he's genuinely like talking about Zeus and the Roman gods, and you go, whoa, I get that they really did, believe in their pantheon on, just like the Greeks did. And I mean, is there anybody that still believes in that pantheon? Is that still an active religion? I don't even know.
I'm sure there is. That's one hell of a language you got there. You speak like that 24/7, huh? I really hope someone gets that reference. Which, that dovetails nicely into the fact that in our work with the text of the meditations, it also, I think we had one discussion where it changed our perspective of how much we throw the word good around.
Oh, yeah.
Like, how's your burrito? It's good.
Good.
So, it donates to charity. When, I think as a result, for me, speaking for myself, that made me really examine the words I use. And so, for example, if someone says, how's your day today? Being more precise in language in saying, how's your day today? It was productive. It went well. It didn't go so well. And I think that not being cheap or economical with words has been one of the very cool takeaways and one of the cool benefits of us having this weekly practice of reading something that takes a little bit of mental thought, mental effort to absorb, and then trying to apply it. Which obviously, when you and I read a passage, like obviously, we don't oftentimes have a day where we're slaughtering barbarians and have to reflect on it.
Not anymore, at least.
Those days are long behind us. But then again, you do have a complex relationship with the wasps in your shed. So
yeah, I appreciate the work that they do, but they don't always set up their houses in places that benefit the both of us.
That is correct. Yes, they are decidedly unreasonable, and they don't speak your language. So,
well, yeah, that's fine. I feel like we communicate okay. It's more their choices harm them sometimes.
Yeah. Which also, when you think about it, and you think about the passages of the meditations, looking to nature, and I'm going to get into our talk about nature as well, but you watch things that can't think or can't reason, and there's a lot of life that mirrors the things that we go through, but just on a different level, on a micro level, where we say, those wasps put a nest right where I need to go. So as much as I want to keep them there, something's about to befall them that's out of their control.
Yeah, like why would you put your home inside the side mirror of my truck? That's
Right.
not going to end well for you.
Yeah, and for them, they're thinking about like, oh man, why haven't we thought of putting a nest right here? Look at this perfect overhang, close proximity to a bunch of grapes.
Or here's another one. Why on the under rim of my garbage cans? Like,
yeah,
they get taken out once a week and get picked up by a machine and dumped upside down.
Yeah.
And they still build their nests under there.
Shows you how industrious they are. And also, another thing that we could learn from them is the fact that, I mean, they just go for it. You know, they're undaunted, and they're like, I got a job I got to get done. We got to make some nests, make some delicious hornet honey, and
you know what that abbreviates to?
Yes, I do. But okay, so similar. Okay, so this is where my brain was also tangentially going, is that Marcus. Oh, I just lost you. My ear fell out. All right, Marcus will oftentimes refer to terms, oftentimes capitalize, so in a grander sense, and to him it makes a lot of sense, but to us we have a lot of baggage that comes with it. So, for example, the word nature, when he says, living in accordance with nature, right?
Yeah.
Is he saying like, well, you should be like, get out of your house, go, crawl up in a hollowed out stump, and that's that's where you should live, right? That's, I think, what modern ears think of. It's probably what sent Thoreau out to the woods, but I don't think the term nature is meant in the way that our modern ears hear it.
Right.
For example, I think that one thing that we use as a mental Kickstarter is sometimes omitting the word nature. For example, living in accordance with nature, and rather thinking of it like nature is the way things are. And it makes a lot of sense to live in accordance to the way things are. It's like, oh, you stubbed your toe and now you're going to have, now your toenail's going to fall off, but it's going to be 6 months of, unsightliness and discomfort, right? Like,
yeah.
Crying about it at that time is not going to do you any good.
Right. Or anger at the situation. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. It's like, your dog's barking, and you can't get mad at a dog for being a dog.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Which translates to people too, because here we think, we go through our day and we're trying to be a nice person and all of that. Come across somebody else and they're doing something obnoxious, like, I don't know, being way too loud or waving you through a 4-way stop intersection. We feel like they should know better, but maybe that's the best they can do. And maybe we don't know the whole story, and the too long didn't read version of it is, what is even the point in getting mad about it if A, that's just how they are, and B, it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
What else?
I think the one we talked about with the way things are is like gravity in a rotting tree, and you park your car under it and it falls and smashes your car.
Yes. Yeah.
It's kind of just, it was going to happen. The wind hits it just right. Yeah. But that's just the way large trees fall.
Yeah, exactly. That's the way the the cookie crumbles. When one door closes, a load-bearing wall collapses. So do you think that in our travels, we've known each other for, we talked about this beforehand, right? How long have we known each other now? Like 15 years?
Yes, or longer, or shorter.
Yeah,
Probably
17.
Longer.
I think it might be like closer to 17 years. So I definitely feel a distinct difference in us having this little exercise. First of all, you and I get to hang out more. Well, virtually hang out. We get to talk on the phone weekly to discuss this. And, that's awesome because we have at least, 104 weeks in a row that we've talked, which is...
Yeah, I haven't missed a week.
Yeah,
And what, 8 years left?
Sign me
up. Till we become citizens?
Yes, exactly. Fingers crossed. So with that...
You want to hear a crazy one I was reading today?
Yeah, I do.
So I was looking at that word psyche because of it meaning soul. There's another word for soul that sounds like pneumonia, and I don't think I can pronounce it, but it's like pneumo something something. Mm-hmm. And it's soul as in like the way we would think of some languages use the word for wind or breath of life as soul also.
Yeah.
So there's another word for soul, but this psyche one is soul, like who you are as a person, I think. This is just me as an amateur reading through these glossaries, trying to sort through what these mean. But right next to it was the word psychosis. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I know that one. Everybody knows psychosis. But then I started reading it.
Yeah.
And psychosis is the process of a baby going from in the womb, your parts are just one type of life, and then like when you exit into the world, the psychosis is the process of turning in, of like gaining a soul, being in the outside world. And there's some weird reference to the cold being one of the things that like pushes that along, which is weird because I think the word for cold sounds just like psycho or something like that.
Which would also make sense because it's kind of like pneumonia,
Well, you get pneumonia when you get your soul from being out in the cold because you left the womb.
So we got to move to Minnesota then.
A womb with a view.
Well, and you mentioning that made me think of another thing that Marcus will say frequently, and also people today say it frequently, but the concept of genius, where
that's right.
Yeah, we think of genius and we're like, oh man, that guy's so good at piano, he's a genius. But the traditional concept of it was like a spirit, like a sprite, which also another word that I think we've talked about how is like never used in its real term anymore. But it wasn't a matter of being a genius initially. It was a matter of being visited by genius. So you'd be sitting in your study trying to write a poem, and then you see a tree fall onto your truck, and all of a sudden you've got this great, the words just start flowing out of you. And that effect was my understanding of the initial interpretation of, my vacuum cleaner decided to start cleaning. 1 second. Let me pause him. I'll have to. Boy, I hope no one's listening right now. So, thank you.
It's like a video game sound.
It is. I should have just paused it. It's going to keep making a bunch of noise. Gosh darn it. Well, anyway, we can live with it. Yep, see? Things that befall us that we couldn't have known. But so the concept of genius isn't a matter of like, oh, I aspire to be a genius one day. It's a matter of you're visited by your genius. And Marcus will oftentimes say that. And we do, I believe we did find what the translation was.
Yeah, it's that word daemon.
That was it, yes. Which
is
people nowadays. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say it's what it sounds like and what we're describing.
Yes. Which is also, I mean, man, computer scientists and computer programmers, so smart. The fact that they created the mailer daemon, which tells you when you send an email to the wrong email address and it doesn't exist. You know, it's not somebody sending it to you. It's like an auto response saying, hey, that's not a real email address. And that, yes. So daemon, Daemon, right, is what is translated to genius, which also does not imply that the person has any special quality, that you just got lucky and that je ne sais quoi visited you and gave you that idea for your great idea, whatever it is.
Right.
Yeah. And
somehow also means an evil spirit. So I don't know how those two things work together.
You know, I think that the imperfect science of translation oftentimes, I mean, look at English as a mishmash of almost every language. And daemon, demon, genius, words are both incredibly precise when they want to be, but also, I don't know, they can be not misleading. I mean, it's not intentional. It's just, to somebody that made sense. And at one point that was the best possible word that they could have picked. And I think that's what we encounter a lot, where that effect will throw us off. You know, we'll read the word nature and we're like, oh, trees. But that's also used in English as like, oh, that's just in his nature. That's, you know, that he's really afraid of guys wearing hats, so he'll bark at you.
Yeah, we can't seem to breed that out of dogs.
Yeah. Maybe we should make dogs wear more hats.
Well,
might fix it.
I hadn't thought of that.
You know, there's probably a reason for that.
You know what one I like that came up really early on was fantasia.
Yeah.
Which is so close to the word fantasy that you think you know what it means, but it's just an impression or an idea.
Yeah.
Or a thought. I mean, it's like a thought. And
which makes sense.
Yeah, I guess that
when you're having a fantasy, you know, but I mean, it does make sense that, so like, you know, you have the thought cross your mind. Some ancient Greek person was racking their brain trying to think of Greek sounding words, and they're like, fantasia, you know, that sounds right. And you take a modern, well, later on down the road when English is coming together and being formulated, you then have somebody who's like, oh man, I was just daydreaming. Or, you know, they wouldn't have words for it. They'd be thinking like what was that thing I was just doing? Like, oh, I don't know. I read a word, fantasia. Oh, we'll call it fantasy. You know, that's a good one. Well, I think we've done it again.
Once again,
philosophy. I don't know why people say this is so hard.
Yeah, it was pretty easy this time.
Yeah. And also, I mean, in theory, this kind of counts for our call, but we didn't talk about this week's text, so I'll probably call you.
This week's text is crazy.
This one is weird.
Like convoluted.
Yeah. He was drunk when he was writing this
But
one.
I think I started understanding it this morning, but I just not quite there.
Yeah. Well, the thing that I like is whenever he lists concepts, he's like, these things are good. And then I think about those concepts and I'm like, do I agree with that? Yeah. Those are actually really good things, like justice, wisdom. That's this week, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Temperance. And what's nice about that is when we do have a laundry list that he's giving us and he's thinking about these things that he thinks are truly good qualities. And I mean good the way that we just discussed, like, morally upright. It gives me something to do throughout the week where day by day I can start to think closely about wisdom and say, all right, well, it is kind of nice to, not be as dumb as I was 20 years ago, but recognize that I'm way stupider than I'm going to be 20 years from now or 40 years from now or whatever it is.
I sure hope I am stupider.
If you're doing it right, I think you...
if you're doing it right, you're way stupider now.
Yeah. And that's the thing, too, is that as you accrue wisdom, you feel stupider over time. So, like, you become more wise, and you're like, man, I don't know anything.
Yeah, I definitely don't know anything.
After we're done with the meditations in 9 years, we should do Diogenes. He seems like a good time.
Yeah, why not? Just move on to the next one.
Yeah.
Solving
Although
philosophy.
I feel like we'd go a lot crazier because he says things like, he goes to a nice house and spits in the owner's face. And when the guy's like, dude, why'd you do that? He's like, well, this place is so nice. I couldn't find any other place to spit. All right. I think we're good. I think this was a nice first pass at actually documenting our thoughts for posterity.
Yeah, our pots for posterity.
I hope that in 2,000 years, when some idiot listens to this, they pick apart everything we said and, from Stoic space heaven, we'll look down on them and we'll say, oh man, they got it all wrong.
I can do that for you right now.
All right, my guy. I think we're good.
All right.